Okay, let's see how we're doing in terms of going live. Kind of seems like we might be live. Let's check it out. Channel. Oh, I think we're there. Yes, marvellous. Huzzah, we're live. So, yes, third stream, second lunch break hobby. There's been a few changes. Having watched back the stream, I think the focus issue was actually a lot worse than I thought it was going to be with the lens I was using. So there's been a change in terms of that, and now I'm using a much shorter lens and have a bit more depth of field control as well. Gone from I think about an f7 on the other one to 22 on this. So now focus should no longer really be any kind of issue. But again, let me know in the comments if it's something that's bothering you or has bothered you, or if there's further improvements I can make. Keen to make these fun. So I'm hoping really in this lunch break, although I am starting slightly late so I won't get as much done as I thought, get a kind of 30-40 minutes in, maybe try and get the metallics finished off, the bone finished off, maybe start trying to pick out some of the details like the haft of the hammer, the little knife on his waist, finish off the leather. I think the job for tomorrow is going to be fixing this cloak, because the more I look at it, the more I'm really unhappy with it. It's just thick and not very finessed. So, yeah, we'll dig into that. The one thing I guess maybe to pick up from last time is I applied that black wash, the brown wash from Pro Acryl, onto just some areas of the bronze, and I'm not sure I really like it. It's kind of taken away more of the luster of the metallics than I wanted it to. I think. Anyway, um, so I think what we'll do is get cracking on the bone. I think, and then I may fix the metallics. I might just leave them like this. Isn't this is never gonna. I'm not trying to reach competition stage painting here. This isn't about it being perfect. It's just about having a bit of fun. So I might just leave it. I would just leave the cloak, but it's so far off that I kind of feel like I need to fix it. But yeah, I think let's focus on the bone. So let's get the wet palette opened. Get some, I would imagine, some more water in there. Tell you what, once I got one of these, once I started using a wet palette, these little squeezy bottles for tattoo artists for water, oh, absolute game changer for moving water around in relation to hobby stuff. Like, so much quicker, so much easier than having like little pots of water or little jugs lying around. So previously I went up to this bright warm grey for the bone, and then brought it back down a little bit with that brown wash. My current planning is pretty much to go back to this and then mix in a little bit of white. I'm debating whether or not to go right the way up to white. I don't think I will. What I'm thinking is, I'll just grab the paint now. There's a couple of whites in the Pro Acryl range actually. There's a transparent white, a white, and he says, leaning over the microphone, so I'm sure no one could hear anything. This heavy titanium white that they added with the Matte Sexwish sort of signature one, and it's an amazing paint. Like, I know the bold titanium white from Pro Acryl is super popular for its coverage, its vibrancy, but that the heavy one is just phenomenal in terms of coverage, in terms of how easy it is to work with, which again is still so much what I look for in good paint, is just that ease of use. I don't want to have to work super hard to make a paint work for me. I really don't. So let's get a bit of this warm white grey out. There we go. Don't need a huge amount. It's only this bit of bone that we're working on after all. And we'll stick. I think we'll stick with the size 1 that we were using yesterday. That seemed to go well. Again, actually, I was chatting to some people about brushes again last night, and I was just sort of talking to them about the difference since I switched to using the Artis Opus brushes, and it really is just quite telling that, like, I'm not a great painter or anything like that, but when you've got tools that don't fight you, like, it makes such a difference. Like, I'd never advocate spending a huge amount of money on brushes if you're perfectly happy with cheaper ones. But I was just getting to that point where the rate at which I was going through them, because I'm not a great painter, you know, it was really starting to get on my nerves and starting to just cause me to struggle to enjoy painting. Whereas switching to these has just been fantastic. Like, really enjoyable, really easy. Again, that's so much of what I look for in a hobby product, is just, for the love of everything, make my life easier. I've got enough things that make finding time for hobby hard. Once I actually make the time, I don't then want to be faced with tools that make the job harder again. But again, like, when my office is in the same room as my hobby desk and this streaming setup, and yesterday, when I was totally giving my full and proper attention to some work that I was doing, I was leaning over and just looking at this skeleton longingly. Yeah, and I just realised that it is so nice to spend time painting a miniature like this, where there is not a huge amount of detail. The sculpt isn't overly fussy, and it's just got so much character to it. Like, so often now I find that, and this goes especially, I guess, for, and it's not just Games Workshop, but they're probably the biggest example of it right now, where miniatures become sort of completely tied to a game system. You end up with a lot of the same miniature, and then a couple of characters or army leaders that are very different and really nice models. And, like, that's fine from a play perspective. You know, you want to be able to easily identify what's what, who does what, and all this other stuff. But from a painting perspective, it's, for me, incredibly dull. Like, I'm trying to get myself excited about painting a new dwarf army up for the return of Old World. But my issue with it is that, you know, I painted a dwarf army once. I still have my painted dwarf army. It's not very good because it was painted a hell of a long time ago. So I want to do it up, nice, new, fresh, new game, new army, all that kind of thing. But it's very difficult to make yourself want to paint something when you're looking at it and just thinking, I'm going to have to paint the same thing 6, 7, 800 times. Great, another block of 30 dwarves. These ones have got axes rather than hammers or whatever. Then I look at the characters and I'm just like, yeah, I want to go and do that. It's really difficult to make myself kind of want to slog through the units just to paint the characters. And I don't know what the answer is for that yet. like I toyed momentarily with learning how to paint non-metallic metal and then painting my whole dwarf army that way. I toyed with that for about 30 seconds, then realised that was an incredibly stupid way of never getting an army finished. Instead, I'm actually gonna use, because my army, my dwarves have always been dwarves of Carrick-Herne. That's always been the hold that I've painted for and played for. But what I'm going to use is, no, not copper. I'm looking for a rather nice gold paint that I've got over on the desk. This won't be it. There we go. This is the Vallejo liquid gold. These are the alcohol-based paints, and they are just stunning. They also come with like drugstore lids, so you have to kind of push down and turn to get the lids off. But they are, I mean, you can't really see anything in that, but they are just the most. You can kind of see the colour around the top there. They are the most stunning golds, like really incredible. But my goodness, do they ever separate? Like there is just no way that I've found to keep this paint together. I would say before using this, I'll probably have to mix it for 10-15 minutes. It's absolutely nightmarish stuff. It's also alcohol based, so it stinks. Is the other side of the trade-off. But the whole set is really nice. Like, there's a white gold in there. Interestingly, there's a white gold and there's a silver. You would think they would look very samey. They really don't, though. There's like a rich gold. I'll probably end up using that some of that in there somewhere. They do a red gold and a old gold. So you kind of just see all these subtle tonal changes. But really, they are just the most incredible metallic pigment, and I've barely used them since buying them, to be honest. Like, I bought those bottles probably, I want to say, 15 years ago, maybe? Somewhere around that. And, yeah, I've just not really found that much use for them. There's a green gold there as well. Interestingly, green gold has a different lid. No idea why. So yeah, I mean, my hope is to use them basically to really make the gold and that Carrick-Herne theme really pop and make it something just a little bit more special than Retributor Armor and Wash. I've always thought like gold is one of those colours where it can be painted really easily, but it never quite looks right. I think gold rarely comes across well in miniatures, and those paints that I was just talking about, those alcohol-based ones, I bought them because specifically they have those incredibly rich pigments that I think is what I don't like about so many metallic paints. Is just the lack of colours that are in them. Like metallics, when you look at metallic colour out in the world, metal, when you look at metal out there in the real world, it's very rarely one colour. Like, it throws tons of different shades and strange, unexpected colours all over the place, and I think that's maybe what's a little bit missing from the majority of metallic paints today. It's just that those strange, unexpected colours that metallics throw out there. A little bit there. Let's just throw on a little bit here. I should have said this is just that same colour, but with just a slight bit of white, that heavy white, thrown in there, just to try and pick out some details. I'm going to go up again, I think almost to pure white, The more I push this bone, to be honest, the more I think, yeah, you know what, just a little bit more, a little bit more. Um, I'm thinking kind of worst case scenario, hey, I can always knock it back. But actually, we all kind of know that we could probably all afford to be a little braver, right? When it comes to highlights or when it comes to colour choice. And I guess this is my attempt to be a little braver, to try a colour or try a level of highlight that I would not normally go to. And actually, I think that's paid off. I think that looks rather good. Definitely not going to take it any higher. Might even need to go in and re-establish a few bits with some additional shadow. But overall, pretty pleased with that. I think it'll look a lot better once there's this plan in my mind to go in and do this green glow around the eyes, and I think actually now it'll really tie together nicely when that goes in. But what I'm thinking is I want to get the half done, I want to get the bit in the middle done, I want to get this bit on his waist done. I think those colour blocks at the minute are really holding up kind of seeing what this looks like. So to that end, what can I do in terms of that? The sort of the shaft of the hammer. I've been going back towards on what colour this ought to be. Like I played around in my mind of it being like a colour, like it was painted. But I think I'm just going to go for something simple, like a dark brown or something like that. Largely just because it's quick and easy, to be honest. No particularly clever reason for the colour choice beyond that. Let's go with a warm brown. No, that seems like a bad choice of colour for this. I want something a little bit darker, a little bit less red. Might go dark umber. That's redder than I thought I would want to go for this, but I'm thinking it might look alright. Yeah, I think looking at that, that's okay. The other nice thing with these Pro Acrylic paints is you get a real nice moment where you peel off that seal on the top and you get to really get an idea of what that colour is going to be. I know a lot of people aren't sort of super keen on the lids of the pots just because they end up with these splodges of colour, right? But I really like those splodges of colour. Having a little dried example on the top of this is what this paint's like, really useful. Like back when GW had the 2000s flippy pots, you would always see everyone's lids. That little dimple in the top of them would be painted the colour that was inside the pot. For exactly that reason, like people wanted an example not just of what the paint looks like wet when you open the pot or when you look in the bottom of it, but what does it look like when it's dried. Like it's an incredibly useful view to have of a paint. I must admit I was super pleased when the AK 3rd gen stuff came out and it had those they've got like little divots in the top of the lids. If you haven't seen one, there we go. They've got these little divots in the top of the lids where you just put a drop of the colour. Absolutely brilliant. I mean, the lids in general, silly as it sounds, genius lid design. Really easy to unscrew or screw back on with one hand. Really nice white vibrant lids, so when you drop the colour in there, you're getting a true representation of what that colour is going to look like when it dries. Absolutely fantastic. I should really use those paints more. I always find that at the minute I'm finding I'm reaching for the Pro Acrylic a lot, and I really should be making more of an effort, I think, to use the use the AKs having bought them and all, but again, at the minute, I'm just finding the Pro Acryl paints so quick, so easy, so enjoyable that I just kind of think, oh, do you know what? I could put the effort in to use something else, but that's not actually where I want to put my effort right now. And I mean, there are colours in the AK range that, you know, I've not seen. I mean, the size of the range lends itself to covering things that other people haven't. It is an insanely huge range of paints. Um, yeah, there's something about these Pro Acryls that really does just set them apart right now. And I mean, they're not like perfect paint or anything like that. Um, but they are just very easy to use, and that for me right now is just the most important thing. Very forgiving, and especially where I'm doing these very short painting sessions, I'm not having to faff around. They're not clogging up my brushes. They're thinning quickly and easily, um, and the colours are doing pretty much what I expect them to do. Like, mixing up to those bone highlights then, um, I've had that before where I've put white into a paint and it's gone some bizarre colour, because, you know, obviously all colours are, or most of our acrylic colours are mixtures of lots of different pigments, and so sometimes when you mix them you suddenly get this bizarro colour creeping out from weird pigment interactions, and I'm just not getting that with these. Like, they're just reliably going, yep, that's the colour I'm supposed to be, so that's what you're gonna see. Love that. Like, that just makes life so easy. Um, so I have realised that there's a little bit of metal at the either end of this thing on his belt. I think it's actually like a small sword or a dagger or something like that. So I think what I'm going to do is go with the bronze for the ends of that, and then I think this sash around his waist, I'm gonna do it red, which feels really odd to say, like looking at like the miniature and the colours and everything that's there now. I'm gonna make the cloak, I think, when I come back to it, I'm going to make it a much darker blue. I'm going to take it right the way down so it's almost like a midnight black. Kind of maybe Payne's grey at the moment is the base. I'm thinking I might make it more like the mid-tone and have the base almost like a true black. So like a real dark blacky blue cloak. And that little sash of red across the middle, I think, will really set it off nicely. The way I'm planning on doing that is initially hitting the whole thing with a transparent blue, just to try and take the take a lot of the edges down quite significantly, and then go in and probably cut over the highlights along the bottom here that are just too thick and clumsy anyway. Like, it almost looks okay, but some of the highlights are so thick and clumsy that they almost look like they were dry brushed on rather than painted on. My fault, moving too quickly. But anyway, I want to then mirror that red onto the kind of, I don't know, frilly bit coming out the top of his hat. I don't really know what to call it, the ponytail. So yeah, I think that's the plan. But immediately actually putting that halved in there, I think that's rather helped with closing down the sense that the miniature looked quite unfinished. Like, I hadn't really thought about it, but it really did actually. It had a look of, I don't even know what about it, but it definitely had a feel of unfinishedness to it that is now gone, which is quite nice. This is a moment there of realising that I'd missed an entire bit under the bottom of the miniature, but no one ever sees under the bottom of the miniature, so that's fine. You only ever see them from the front, side, back. No one ever turns your model upside down and looks under it, does it? So, not going to worry about that. Quick time check, it's past, so we've got a little bit longer. So I think, yeah, I'm going to try and get the metallics on for the ends of that. Come on, there we go. Yeah, we'll get the metallics on and then revisit what we still have time for today. One thing I have just noticed is I've got a rather large air bubble under my wet palette. That's not ideal. I'll have to solve that in a moment. Tell you what, that's one thing I have continued to fight recently. Actually, has been my wet palette. Like, since getting back into the hobby, I've been using it, and I like it overall. I'm not sure it's as much of a game changer as it maybe is for better painters. I think if you're doing a lot of sort of complex blends or whatever, maybe it's a real kind of like it has a really big impact on how you paint. But I don't think I'm a good enough painter in the first place to really feel those benefits. So mostly, if I'm honest, my experience of using a wet palette thus far is an experience of fighting bubbles and things getting too wet, not wet enough, realising that the floors in my office are nowhere near flat, so my desk is nowhere near flat, so all the water runs to one side in the reservoir, so I'm filling it up from one side thinking, wow, this sponge is drinking a lot, only to look over to the other side and realise that half of the wet palette's completely submerged. It's been interesting. I'm honestly not sure I would recommend a wet palette to someone else, if I'm honest. Really only because that just that classic kind of how can you recommend something when, if I'm honest, I wouldn't buy one again. Like, if I'm struggling to use something, I'm not going to go, oh yeah, you should definitely get one of these. That just seems daft. Really am struggling to get paint out of this scale 75 bottle at the minute. I'm wondering if there's something caught somewhere in there. I have got agitators in all my scale 75 paints, just because they don't get as much use as they should, and so they tend to settle a little bit. I'm kind of hoping that the agitator maybe is just a bit clogged, and that it's making it difficult to get. So I'll pop a pin through the end of it later. That usually sorts it out. Let's get a little bit of water, not that much. And again, I spoke in the last stream about my issue with over diluting paint. I've always done it. I used to do it last time I was in the hobby. I came back, nothing's changed in that regard. But I do think the wet palette is somewhat exacerbating that, because now, even before I deliberately dilute paint, the wet palette is of course naturally doing it. And I wonder if realistically I ought to, like I have just done there, just go from bottle to wet palette and then not mess about with it anymore. Just because it's already actually in a pretty good place the moment it goes onto the wet palette. Like, not perfect, but pretty close, and arguably from here I will, like, without a shadow of a doubt, over dilute it, at which point that's probably worse than it I say it's worse than it going on a little bit thicker. It's not, but in terms of frustration of my process, like, I don't want to have to do 6 coats of whatever this is, black leather, just to get a base coat down. Not when, generally speaking, scale 75 paints have pretty good coverage. It's only because of my over dilution that I end up having to do as many coats as I do and going through as much paint as I do. So yeah, maybe that's the solution, eh? Figured as I had the black leather out, I would go in and do that re-establishing post-wash that I needed to do on the boots. Again, sort of one of those things that I quite like about this mini is just the fact that there aren't that many little areas to go back to. Like in terms of leather on the model, you've got the boots, you've got the little bit of the sword in the middle there. In terms of the armour, you've got chainmail, breastplate, helmet. In terms of the weapon, it's just there. It's a hammerhead and the bit of wood that it's on, like nothing else. I really enjoy this kind of super simple piece. And as much as like I look at newer models and it's like, wow, it's got all this detail or whatever on it. I don't think anyone would look at this mini and say, oh, well, do you know what that needs? It needs more detail, or it needs this, or it needs that. Like, this is a great model. Like, for all its simplicity and its age, it's still a freaking great model. Like, it does an amazing job of capturing movement. It does a great job of telling a little bit of a story, of setting a scene. To my mind, of setting like an age. Like that, I spoke before, that feel of antiquity in the armour and in the bone. It's so interesting that what they achieved was such a simple sculpt. When you look at how flat the sculpt is as well, like that is among the flattest of all sculpts, and yet stunning, lovely model. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's badly overlooked. These, I think. Right, got that done. Got the boots done. I'm tempted to have a look at the red and see how I might want to go about that, but I'm not really sure what red to go for. Don't want anything excessively bright. That is the challenge. And I feel like a lot of the reds that I'm naturally reaching for are way too bright. Let's see what we've got, shall we? So, burnt sienna, burnt red. I'm wondering if that burnt... Oh, actually, I'm wondering if those two kind of provide... probably not, actually. Probably go burnt red, I think. This is quite a nice, dark, rich colour. I'm thinking burnt red. Oh. Sorry about that. For some reason my mixer has... it got under its own cable, over its own cable, so now it's juddering all over the place whenever I use it. There we are, let's fix that. Yeah, like this is a nice dark, rich red. I think it'll provide a decent base. Let's pop that down on the palette. Don't need a lot. Tiny amount of water. And this has been a real thing for me since coming back into the hobby. The ability now to take something like a red paint and just put it on a black undercoat and have a reasonable expectation that it will just take, and that, alright, it's not going to be like perfect in one coat, but it'll pass as red, or read as red, I should say. Oh yes, straight away I can see this was I am now pleased with this choice. I think having that splash of colour through the middle of the mini is really gonna help. I'm not sure I want to go lighter the burnt red though, so I'm thinking I might have to do this in reverse. Wait for that coat to dry, get another coat on there of this so it's nice and solid, and then maybe just mix in a little bit of black and just go in and kind of glaze that into the recesses. It's such a small area that I'm not actually too worried about capturing tons of detail in there. I mostly just want to make sure that it, that it has depth and that those folds are well represented, because where it's so small, there's a risk, obviously, that that bright colour just overwhelms all the actual shape there. May not even need a second coat, to be honest. Looking at that, that's quite cool. What I am going to need to do though is just quickly touch up a bit of that leather that red touched. There we go. Yeah, I think that works quite well actually, just adding that little bit of colour there. And again, sort of thinking about how this is all going to work, I'll go in with some white into these recesses, probably like an oil paint white, just to drop in there so it catches it all and capillaries around. All the little sort of nooks and crannies around the top, the eyes, under the arms, around there. It's same with this side of the armour, and that's where I'll have that glow coming out of. And I think I'm just going to use a fluoro paint for that. Most likely the Scale 75 ones. I really like their fluoro paints. I think they work really well. And despite sort of their inherent trend towards a gloss finish, they remain incredibly matte. Now at the end of all this will get a coat of matte varnish anyway, which will impact the metallics somewhat, but I quite like the look of matte varnish metallics. It's a little bit odd, I know, to kind of use a paint whose main thing is that it has a shine to it, and then deliberately take that away. But you'll see at the end what, maybe you will, maybe you won't, but in my opinion you'll see at the end of the project maybe why sort of why I like that approach. It creates a really nice finish. But yeah, okay, so I think that's going to be it for today. The time has come, sadly, to return to work. But thank you for joining me for this lunchtime hobby stream. And yeah, I'll be back tomorrow at around 1 o'clock. I'll catch you then.